The green wave at the ballot box means more states than ever before have legalized cannabis programs. And what does that mean for cannabis stocks exactly? Well, for more, we go now to Marijuana Policy Project Executive Director Stephen Hawkins, and I'm also joined by our very own Tom Carroll, the editor of Cannabis Capitalist. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Stephen, I kind of get the sense that New Jersey is a bit of a linchpin, and that you believe that there are sort of dominoes. There's a domino effect when it comes to legalization. There have been, as you know, 5 states that recently legalized programs on Election Day. Can you talk a little bit about why New Jersey seems to be a linchpin on the East Coast for sort of causing more dominoes to fall?
Sure. So New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York have all been doing a dance, if you will, for the last several years while the legislature has debated and deliberated on cannabis legalization. With the voters in New Jersey having voted by referendum to legalize cannabis, now the legislature is quickly acting to pass law that will be implemented and get that market going in 2021 in New Jersey. That is putting pressure on New York and putting pressure on Connecticut and even Rhode Island to follow suit, because quite frankly, people will be riding across the bridge into New Jersey, and all those tax dollars will flow into the Garden State. And New York legislature and Connecticut don't want that to happen.
Let's bring up another neighbor of New Jersey, which is Pennsylvania. You have a different political dynamic there where you have the majority of people supporting cannabis legalization in the state. You have a Democratic governor, but you have a Republican legislature that has been blocking passage of adult use. How does New Jersey's passage fit into their calculation about finally legalizing cannabis?
The challenge in Pennsylvania is you have a Republican legislature and that is still sort of stuck in a specific way of thinking about cannabis. But here's, I think, what's going to be very different in 2021. And that is that while we've had libertarian support from the conservative side of the aisle, we have not had fiscal hawks. And as revenue is being depleted in state budgets, every state in the country is facing some form of budget deficit. It certainly is giving room for advocates like my organization to argue, look, this is a dedicated revenue stream that can help your state economy during these tough times. That is going to be a message that more and more fiscal conservatives are at least open to listening to, and some will embrace.
When you see states like Mississippi in particular pass legal adult use, what does that mean for the rest of the Southeast, which is essentially a block of holdout states who have yet to really have some form of legal cannabis program? Do you think, what would you say the next state to fall might be, and why?
That is the second domino effect, that just like we will see New Jersey has the domino effect in the Northeast, I see Mississippi having a similar potential domino effect in the Southeast. It could change the dynamics for states like Alabama, certainly South Carolina, which has been having a debate over the last couple of years in terms of passing medical cannabis. We could see the Louisiana medical cannabis industry expand, right, as people could more readily go over the border into what's going to be a more generous program in Mississippi. And then also states like Kentucky, which have also had good committee votes, but have yet to be able to bring cannabis to the floor. I think with Mississippi creating probably what could become the most robust medical program in the Southeast, that will have an impact on the neighboring states.
What do you think the strongest argument is to those southern states that have yet to pass a program?
It will be having the veterans community talk more about what cannabis has meant for pain relief for veterans, being able to sleep through the night. Those sorts of new voices coming into the southern legislatures will make the difference. And of course, patients, cancer patients and others.
Does what happened in New Jersey and a potential domino effect in the Northeast, as well as the other states across the country that we saw at the ballot box vote to legalize cannabis, what does that do at the federal level? Does that maybe make it incrementally more likely that we see things like the Safe Banking Act or the States Act, as opposed to removing cannabis from Schedule 1?
You know, Tom, it may end up being both. Certainly, this is your classic example of change coming to Washington. The number of states that are legalizing cannabis just makes the current status quo untenable. We're going to have, there's going to be some relief with respect to banking, and I expect to see that certainly in the next Congress. And we will see other changes that might fall short of descheduling. But I also think that there will be a push around descheduling. We could see 5 more states just in this next legislative session legalize cannabis for adult use. And Tom, right behind those states are going to be probably another 4 or 5 ballot initiatives in 2022. So cannabis will continue to shape what's happening in the states is going to continue to, I think, shape what happens in Congress. And we're going to start to pick up some new supporters. I've paid attention to, for example, Senator Thune's response and Senator Round's response, where they can't believe that their constituents have voted for cannabis legalization. But they will go from disbelief to begin to embrace the industry. It's not going to happen overnight, but we will start to see, I think, a sort of thawing out of some people's views around cannabis.
Let's say that the 2 seats in Georgia actually go Democrat, right? And I think that, a Biden-Harris White House, a Democratic Senate, I mean, that's like best case scenario that the world believes for cannabis. What is wrong with that? What should be, so let's say that happens. What are the risks at that point and the hurdles that remain that we should really take to heart and not just, throw a giant party?
That's a great question, Tom. And what we really need to still take to heart is that while public opinion polling and these last ballot initiatives show that cannabis enjoys broad public support across the political divide, when you had deep red states like South Dakota and blue states like New Jersey, the electorate in both states, one state voting for Donald Trump, the other not, but the electorate in both states voting for cannabis, we have not translated that where the public is fully to where the political circles are and where the politicians are. That's our challenge, Tom. We have to still close that gap. So even if we get 2 Democratic senators out of Georgia and the Democrats might control the US Senate, well, we're still going to need 7 or 8 Republican senators at the very least to go along with cannabis reform. So we still have that work to do.
Let me ask you this, because you lost an important Republican advocate for cannabis in Cory Gardner. He lost his re-election campaign. What or who is the most likely friend to cannabis on the Republican side of the aisle going forward?
We put together a long list of individuals to start to work on.
I bet you did.
But there is no heir apparent at this moment. I mean, Rand Paul certainly comes to mind as somebody who would be with us on the issue. Whether he's willing to exert further political leadership remains to be seen. In my view, any of the Republican senators that are representing states which have fully adopted cannabis legalization, they need to come on board because there will be growing industry in their states. So that's John Thunes, that's Mike Rounds, that's Senator Daines in Montana. That's both Republican senators from Alaska. So those are the most likely places where leaders may emerge. But we're also looking at some potential for others within the Republican ranks.
What is your thought on the Canadian operators?
Well, the Canadian companies are still blocked in many ways, and I think they clearly see an interest in seeing cannabis legalized at the federal level. And when I say legalized at the federal level, if cannabis is simply descheduled and left to the states to make a determination, that would open up the doors. I think the Canadian companies are certainly paying attention to what's happening in the Northeast, because it's a sign of the growth in the industry that is to come. I mean, there's estimates that we could see a $9 billion market in the Northeast corridor. So I think that it behooves everyone to be thinking about the day that cannabis is fully legalized, because it will take care of the issues around 280E. It will take care of any remaining issues that we face in terms of having a fully realized industry.
You brought up sales expectations and market expectations. Can we just ask you for what your revisions may be on sales expectations overall, given these 5 states that have now passed programs?
I won't venture to call myself a financial analyst, but what we've seen from like a credible study in Connecticut, and this is what we're saying to state governments. Like, so when I see a study come out of the University of Connecticut, which estimates that the tax revenue alone for the state could be $1 billion over 5 years, or that Texas could pick up $300 million in tax revenue each year. From that standpoint, there is again the opportunity to get fiscal hawks, fiscal conservatives, individuals concerned about tax hikes, to get them on board. And the revenue projections behind that are I think realistic and speak to the volume that's possible.
That would be a good fight against the illicit market as well, correct? I mean, a lower tax structure, it's kind of a balance, right? You want your tax dollars in, but at the same time, you want to not make it so high that the illicit market continues to thrive.
And then, of course, Tom, one of the other challenges that we continue to face is we can win these state legislative battles and ballot initiative battles, but if we still have local municipalities blocking industry from their towns, that has that has its own chilling effect on what's possible. For a state like New Jersey, some municipalities that will allow it will do quite well, and perhaps all of that sort of adjusts itself over time. But that has been a problem in terms of at least seeing a spread of dispensaries and processing facilities and so forth around states.
Well, it sounds like the green wave is ushering cannabis out of the era of the wild, wild west, Stephen Hawkins, Executive Director of the Marijuana Policy Project, and Tom Carroll, our very own Tom Carroll, joining us from Cannabis Capitalist. Thanks, guys, for joining me. And we will be back to you because this is a moving target and investors definitely want to know. Thanks so much for joining me. And if you'd like to catch up with any more Stansberry research content, please take a look at all of these social media platforms where you can find us. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Jessica Stone.